from the New York State Association for arranging this today. I think I have about 65 slides, and I'm not going to go through them all because I want to make sure that we've got time for questions and answers, but I wanted to make sure you had the information available. So I included the slides. We're just going to dig right in. If you do have questions, I want to be able to answer them for you, so please do put them in the chat. Make sure that they go to me and Lauren because I can't see them right now, but she can, and she can interrupt me. I do talk fast. I grew up in Connecticut, but I think that you folks should be able to follow. I'll try to keep myself slower so you understand what I'm talking about. Let's dive in. We're talking about the census today, and we're going to talk about why it matters to you, how COVID-19 has drastically changed what we thought this year would be, as well, with everything, but specifically in regards to the census. How things are supposed to be happening, how things are happening, and how you can help us do this crucial process for our democracy. I have several slides about messaging. If we have time to go through them, I will. If not, they're there for your benefit. And when we send this PowerPoint out, you can go and read those slides in full. You can find the PowerPoint presentations and the underlying research that they came from. And then we'll do questions as best we can. So let's dive in with what the census actually is. We have been doing the census in this country since 1790. So this is a process that our founding fathers created to make sure that political representation was allocated fairly across the country. Back in 1790, we were small. We were not 50 states, and they knew that we would be growing. And so they devised the census as a way for the growing population to keep up with, or actually the apportionment of congressional seats to keep up with the growing nation. We count everyone who lives in America or lived in America on April 1st of 2020. Every 10 years we do this. Census Day has been April 1st for quite some time. So if you lived in America, regardless of your status, if you are a foreign citizen, if you are an undocumented immigrant, if you are a green card holder, if you are an au pair visiting for 6 months, if you lived in America on April 1st, you should be counted. And we'll get into why this is really important, but that is the process. We count everyone, and then once we count everyone, we take that full total population number of the United States. We divide it by 435, which is the number of congressional representatives. And then they allocate each state the number of seats in the House of Representatives that they get. So the more people in your population you count, the more representation you get in Congress. It also trickles down into state House and state Senate races. So we'll get to that. These are the questions. So this is actually surprising to a lot of people because they think that the survey is far more intensive and invasive. A little bit of history. They used to do something called the short form, which is essentially what we have here in front of you, these 10 questions, and the long form. In 2005, they split those surveys. And so in 2000, they did both the long form and the short form in the decennial census. In 2005, they started doing the American Community Survey. So the long form became the American Community Survey. So the long form is continually it's an ongoing survey. So they do it every year. They survey 1% of American households every year. No household will receive that form more than once every 5 years, but 1% of the population gets that. And that asks questions like, how do you commute to work every day? And how many months out of the last year did you work and earn money? How much did you make on average every month last year? So more invasive questions that talks about income and talks about, just a little bit more of a snapshot of America. The decennial census is just these 10 questions now. So we are working at home today. So we have, this is Nancy. She might come up and visit again. So these 10 questions are all that the survey asks now: age, date of birth, Hispanic origin, race. Race is different this year. In 2010, they asked that you could only pick one box or something limiting. The feedback that they got from people was that they wanted to be able to fully express their ethnicity. And so now you can mark more than one box. So if you have Anglo-Saxon roots and African-American roots, you can put both of those down. If you are South American and Asian, you can put both of those boxes. If you're Native American and Caucasian, you can put both of those down. You can also write in your own description, word of caution, make sure that it's not, I'm a purple unicorn, because that will get you a follow-up visit from the Census Bureau. But they wanted people to be able to express who they were and recognize that we have multicultural people living in America. Origins is also a new thing. If you can't tell, I am from Northern European descent. My ancestors are from England and Germany. So I checked the box that said white because that's what I am. And then it asked for country of origin. And I put Germany and England. This is tripping some people up. Some people think that it's a citizenship question, and it is not. They're just trying to get a better picture of where Americans come from or people who live in America. They will then ask relationship. How is this person related to person one? So if you go through these questions for each person in your household. So if you're a spouse, if you're a child, you would mark that relationship. They ask gender, male or female. These are the only two options right now. We've gotten some feedback that people who are non-binary or transgender don't quite know what to do with this. You fill it out to the best of your ability. My guess is that in 2030, there might be a third option, but we don't know yet. And then they ask if the house is rented, the apartment or mobile home, what kind of a dwelling it is and how it's paid for. So is it owned or rented? Then there are a few operational questions. How many people lived here on April 1st of 2020? Were additional people staying here? That's meant to catch the granddaughter that a grandmother is taking care of, but doesn't consider her living there. She's just staying there. However, if that's where the child is for the foreseeable future, if the grandmother is the caretaker, then the grandmother needs to count that child. So these questions are trying to catch those people. Or if you have a couch surfing friend who doesn't have another address to call home, that person also needs to be counted on your census form. If you have a basement tenant, the survey includes everyone who lives in that home, regardless of familial relationships. So even people who are not related, that means roommates. These questions are trying to capture that to make sure that we don't have an undercount. And then they ask, which is more and more important in the age of COVID-19, for the telephone number and the name of the person filling out the census. The census does not ask for any of these things. Social security numbers, doesn't matter. Bank or credit card information, no. Citizenship status, there was a big question about it last year, whether or not this would be included. The Supreme Court struck it down. There is no citizenship question. They don't ask anything political. They don't ask for donations. They don't ask for household income. Sometimes people say, I filled out the survey and they really got the American Community Survey and they still need to do the decennial census. So that's the American Community Survey does ask for household income. The decennial census, which is what we're focused on today, does not. I often use all of these things when I talk about the citizenship question because telling them that there are lots of things that they don't ask about, couching it in this list makes it a little bit easier for people to hear and not get worried. It doesn't raise flags if you don't separate it out a little bit. So that's one of the reasons why I use this whole list, although none of these things are asked for. So if you have somebody that calls you up and says, I'm from the Census Bureau, I need you to complete your census form, please start with your social security number, that's a scam for sure. So just want to raise that awareness. Okay, so I talked a little bit about this already. The census, what the census data is used for. Apportionment is where they divide up the country's population by the 435 seats, and they determine how many seats New York will receive. Once that's done, we go through a process called redistricting. Some people may know the term gerrymandering. It's all part and parcel. When your population shifts, you need to redraw your boundaries. So in 2010, New York lost a congressional member because your population, it may not have declined, but in proportion to the other states, your population had lessened. So if you lose a seat, then those people who live in that district need to be shuffled into other districts to make sure that they receive political representation. So redrawing those boundary lines, it doesn't just happen on the congressional level. It also happens for state legislative districts, both House and Senate, school districts, and voting precincts. School districts are important because if you have one school that's overcrowded and the next school over is half empty, you want to redraw those boundaries to make sure that both schools are equally full. And that process will happen in 2021, and we'll get to that. We care about political representation because we want people who live in poverty to have a voice. We know that if we count all the people who live in an underfunded area get counted, you'll receive more resources and more representation. That's where I was going, representation. It's important for people who live in poverty to have a voice, to have somebody championing them in Washington, in Albany, wherever it is that you have a voice, a representative. If we miss people in the census, then the voice is diluted because not everybody was counted. And it could be that one area qualifies for an additional state representative that will then reflect the needs and the voice of the population that they represent. Distribute federal dollars to states is the next thing. This is the other big reason that community action is involved in the census. It comes down to dollars. And a lot of the programs that we run in our agencies are funded based on formulas that include census numbers. So if we don't have an accurate count, we are losing about $2,000 per person every year for 10 years. So if you miss 10 people in your area, you've just missed $20,000 a year for 10 years. So you're missing out on $200,000 worth of funding that goes to programs like yours over the next 10 years. It gets really important. Census data is also used to inform government planning. Where do we put a fire station? Where do we put a new hospital? How do we zone this area? Where do we allow residential buildup? All of those questions are informed by census in some way. As community action, we use the census numbers in our community needs assessments every 3 years. So if we don't do an accurate count, the numbers that we use to plan the programs that we provide our communities will be off. And so we might not be providing the best programs or the most informed programs based on our population if the population count is off. So for us, for planning purposes, it's really important. Organizational decisions, businesses, bars, restaurants, expansion stores, the next ice cream shop, they all use census data to determine where a good place to locate their headquarters or a new branch of their business, where they have good roads, highway transportation funding is all determined by census numbers. So organizations, businesses decide on their operational plans based on census data. And census data is used to enforce voting rights and civil rights legislation. Some people rankle at the idea that they're being asked their race. Some people think that race is being asked so they can be marginalized. I understand that. And that's not what it's for. It's to actually help enforce the laws that we have on the books to protect the rights of minorities and people of color. So it's also used in that way. Okay, so the census, these dates have changed a lot. The census kicked off in Alaska in January. It's a long story, not going to get into it. For the most of the American population, the 50 contiguous states, invitations were sent out 6 weeks ago, starting March 12th. For the most part, people were sent invitations to respond online. The website is www.my2020census.gov. The online response forum is new this year. Also new is the ability to fill out your census form over the phone. So you've always been able to call and ask questions. You've never been able to call and answer the survey over the phone before. This is a game changer for rural America. This is a game changer for senior citizens. My grandmother is 95 years old. She lives in an apartment in an assisted living facility in the middle of Illinois. And I just found out last week that Grandma got a paper form. She can't read it. Her eyesight's going. She can make a phone call. So I'm having the tech person in the facility dial the phone for her and make sure that she knows her address. And then she's going to have a lovely conversation with a Census Bureau employee. For places that don't have broadband, for places that have internet scarcity, the phone is going to be the unsung hero of the census. And I think we've got a little bit more about that later in the presentation. So originally, most of the people in America received an invitation that third week of March to respond online or on the phones. They've sent a bunch of reminder letters and postcards. They finally sent the paper questionnaires starting April 8th. Because of COVID-19, it was supposed to end middle of April, but it took them a little bit longer. So those went out throughout the month of April. Right now, we're in that final postcard that has been sent before in-person follow-up, which is not accurate. The postcard did say, fill out the census form now or someone will come to your door, because that's what they had preset before all of the pandemic lockdowns began, et cetera. So that postcard did go out last week, and it is going out this week. And it does say, fill it out now or someone will come to your door, which is kind of true, but we have a little bit more time. Non-response follow-up is where Census Bureau employees go knock door to door. That was supposed to start this week. The Census Bureau has suspended all in-person operations due to the pandemic. So that is not happening. The new dates for that to begin is the middle of August. So even though people are getting a postcard now that says fill it out now or someone will come to your door, that somebody probably won't come to their door until August. So what the Census Bureau has done, the census was supposed to end July 31st, and that's proved impossible. So the first thing that they did was push the date back to August 14th. And then 2 weeks ago, the Census Bureau went to Congress and said, we need 4 more months. They asked for 120 more days in the allotment to report out the data. So right now, we are all operating under the idea that the last day to fill out the census will be Halloween, which I'll show you some numbers in a couple of slides, which is a good thing. We need that extra time because right now, especially New York City is being hit very hard by the pandemic. People are focused on COVID-19. That's what's happening. That is the only story that matters right now. And especially for people who have lost their jobs, who are flooding our agencies, how do we ask them, oh, by the way, there's a government form we really need you to fill out right now, when they're worried about feeding their families. So we're pleased that we have that time, but that's why these dates are a little bit wonky. They changed a few times, and they will change again. So in this slide on the bottom, where it says click here for all COVID-19 Census Bureau timeline adjustments, the Bureau has a PDF that they've been very good about keeping up to date. These are some additional dates. So I'm going to show you a map of where New York's doing well and where New York's not doing so well with census response. One of the reasons why some of those places aren't doing well is because they're rural areas where PO boxes are the norm. The census cannot send PO boxes census invitations. So there's a large portion of the population where the Census Bureau physically goes to the door and leaves a packet of census materials at the doorstep. They're supposed to knock just to make people aware that that's there. They have suspended that, but they are starting to resume that tomorrow, but just in these states, and New York is not one of them. And we just got this news this morning. But they are watching where the pandemic has ebbed a little bit, and they are looking for where state governors are allowing a little bit more activity, and they're starting to reopen just a little bit. So we're watching that pretty closely. Right now, there are field offices across the country that have been shut down because of COVID, and right now they're saying that by June 1st, those offices will be open and at peak operation, which means humming, fully firing on all cylinders. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's what they're saying right now. June 13th is when some of the rural drops we're supposed to start. They're pushing that up for some places. But my guess is that right now the target is for June 13th for New York. Puerto Rico has a 7% response rate right now. The rest of the country average is 50.8, I believe. I'm mentioning that because I know that there are a lot of relatives, Puerto Rican relatives in New York. And so I figured it was worth mentioning. They only have a 7.2% response rate right now. And it's because they are supposed to get those packets in at the doors. They're supposed to have all their packets left at the doors, and that hasn't happened. So Puerto Rico hasn't been invited to fill out the census yet. So it's something just to note because I know that there are connections. They started doing in-person group quarters enumeration April 2nd, and they're going to continue that now through September. So that's homeless shelters. That is domestic violence shelters. We're talking about retirement homes, facilities like where my grandmother is. Anywhere you've got a group house, 10 people, they're doing that separately. And I know that some of you work with those populations. I was surprised that my grandmother got her own invitation, but I know that the administration of the building selected that option rather than filling out a roster on behalf of the building. In-person group quarters will hit some of the homeless population. Transitory locations will hit the rest of the homeless population, we hope, where they will literally go down. I live in Denver, Colorado. We have a creek not far from where we live, and homeless populations camp on the banks of the river. So the Census Bureau, maybe in September, will go down and count those people. And when we're counting people, we have to remember that it all goes back to April 1st. I actually didn't talk about this very much. April 1st was Census Day. And so on the form, it asks, who else lived here on April 1st? Were there other people staying here on April 1st? That's because April 1st is the day where we have a snapshot of America. If people just filled out the form whenever they, and if I filled out today and I thought, oh, who lives in my house today? What if a friend of mine moved in with me since April 1st? And they filled out their census where they were before. Now, because it's May 5th, I'm filling out the form and I include them. It means that they get double counted. So April 1st is Census Day, which is a way to push people to complete the forms because there's a deadline kind of, right? It's an artificial deadline. But it's also the day where you think about who lives in your house. I had a question from somebody who had filled out their form middle of March when they got their form in the mail. They went online and filled it out. And then they had a baby. The baby came really early. And the baby was born on March 26th. And she said, can I fix that? Can I add my baby? Because she did not expect the baby that was due in June to come in March. And she can. She went online. She did a non-ID response. She was able to add that baby to her census form, which is really important. But it goes to show that April 1st, you miss some people and you add some people that might pass away. It's just a snapshot of America to give us the best sense we can of who lives in the country on that one day. So even in September, and this is one of the dangers of pushing those dates back, in September, we're asking people to remember who lived in their household on the April 1st, which is complicated, right? So I know that this is going to cause some trouble, which is why as soon as we can start pushing for people to fill out these forms again, we need to try to get our numbers up and our responses in before people forget. And I know the Census Bureau is thinking about that. The other tricky part is college students. If you have a college student in your home and they live on campus, let's say that you live in upstate New York and they go to NYU. NYU shut down their dorms middle of March before invitations really got out, and your college kid came home. Technically, your college kid was living with you on April 1st. The Census Bureau has asked for that college student to be counted at their school address. College kids who live in dorms are counted by the institution, so the NYU would count that student in the dorms. But if somebody lives off campus, they need to go online and fill out the census form using their school address. So that is the one exception to the April 1st rule that we've gotten Census Bureau guidance on, which I can answer more questions about if that was confusing, which it sorry, what may have been. Service-based enumeration, at some point they do go into soup kitchens to count the homeless populations that are coming to soup kitchens, those sorts of things. We don't know when that will resume. We don't know when that's going to be safe as an activity. Mobile questionnaire assistance, they're supposed to have vans with 2 Census Bureau employees and a couple of tablets or hotspot enabled computers so people can fill out the forms. Also doesn't seem safe right now, so we're not sure when we're going to be able to implement that plan. And the homeless population counts, we don't know when that'll be. So things are changing. We're trying really hard to keep up with it all, but the basics are still the same. Okay, so the 120 days that they've asked for, pushing everything back so we have until Halloween to collect these responses, to get people to fill out their forms, to make sure that our states get the funding that they need for the programs that we support. All of that, what that does is push back the apportionment count. So these are the numbers for dividing up the state's representatives. The data is supposed to go to the president by New Year's Eve, and the Census Bureau has asked Congress to change those dates. Instead of New Year's Eve, they have until April 30th to give those numbers to the president, which gives each state their allotment. That would also then push the redistricting counts back to July 31st from April. When we talk about redistricting and how that process works, changing those redistricting counts will make a big impact in Virginia and New Jersey, because both of those states do off-cycle post-presidential year gubernatorial elections. In English, that means that after the presidential elections, so 2020 is a presidential year, next year is when both New Jersey and Virginia elect their state house, their state senate, and their governors. They're the only 2 states of the union who do it that way. Every other state does it either in conjunction with the presidential election or during the midterms. So they're odd, but it's important because you can't really redistrict the entire state in the middle of a campaign season, which is why we're watching that pretty closely. California has a new commission to redistrict their lines. So if they need to move some of their district lines, they now have a nonpartisan commission that will do that work. It might actually, Colorado, I know for a fact, has one that's made up of independents, Republicans, and Democrats. And this commission is meant to be fair and not to do gerrymandering, which is where districts are drawn to benefit Republicans or Democrats to keep the seats in political power. So they're trying to do a nonpartisan redistricting. California has tied their rules to census numbers, and so we're watching that as well. So there are impacts for our democracy for changing these dates, and yet because of the pandemic, there's really no other choice. We really need to give ourselves more time to make sure that people have the opportunity to fill out the census. Okay, I'm about to show you a couple of maps. Quickly, CUNY, the City University of New York, received a grant to create interactive maps. These maps can show you how your area got your census form. So did you get an online invitation? Did you get a form in English and Spanish? Were you mailed a paper invitation right out of the gate, which some people got because response rates are lower in those areas? How did you get your census form? You can also go and see who has responded and who hasn't, not by household, but by neighborhood. The important thing on this slide to note is that in those rural areas, those folks who have not yet received invitations, they can still go online and fill out their form. They can still call and fill out their form. The Census Bureau wants us to tell people to wait for their invitation, but that's not how we feel about it. If somebody is inclined to fill out the census form, even if they haven't gotten their ID, they should go online and do it. The online form does ask for a census ID. That census ID is being mailed to people. You don't need it. Directly below the box where you can type in the census ID, it says, click here to, I don't remember the exact language, but something like click here to fill out the form without an ID. You just click there, you enter your address, it gets matched up to the file, and you're good to go. And again, it's called non-user ID. That's also how you would add somebody if you filled out your form and forgot the basement tenant, or you had a baby that came early. That's how you would also do that. But my point here is that if you have not gotten a census form, you can still do the form without that invitation. You do not need to wait. And in fact, if someone's really excited to fill out the census once you've talked to them about it, please have them go do this. The online version has 59 different languages. So it's the my2020census.gov, but then you can toggle to Spanish and Vietnamese, Korean. There are 59 different languages. I have not memorized them all, that you can see the form in online and fill out the form in online. On the phones, they have 12 different languages other than English. They have Puerto Rican Spanish for Puerto Rico. They've got English and Spanish dedicated ones for Puerto Rico. They have English and Spanish for mainland. They have Mandarin Chinese. They've got Cantonese. They have Vietnamese, Japanese, Haitian Creole, French. So there are opportunities for the multicultural America that we are to have something in language that is not English. That is online, and that's on the phones. Okay, so you guys, how are you doing? The lighter yellow areas are doing better than the darker yellow areas. The blue areas are doing better than the orange and yellow areas. So New York City is not doing as well as Long Island. The suburbs of New York are doing pretty well, which is to be expected. Albany, that's the suburbs of Albany. If you zoom in, it's probably the suburbs of Albany that are doing pretty well, not the actual city itself. New York has a 50.8% response rate. I misquoted earlier. I actually don't remember where we are as a nation overall, but 50.8% is where New York is. In 2010, the final self-response rate, so how many people responded to the mail invitation, was 64.6. And the top chart over here shows the green is internet only. So 40%, 42% or so of people in New York responded through the internet. The 50.8% is also the paper mail invitations that went out over the past few weeks. So we saw a bump from that. It looks like we're not far off, but the farther we get from Census Day, the harder it is to convince people to do the census form because, oh, Census Day was in April. Why am I doing it in May? And the harder it is for people to recall, so the accuracy of the data is left in a little bit of question. The final rate of 64.6 was achieved also through people knocking doors. So we're missing out on 35% of New Yorkers. And if you think about that, that's a huge number. And that translates into real dollars. So $2,000 per person, a third of your population. You guys are missing out on money and political representation, which is why this is important. My guess is that these dark orange spots are rural. And so we're developing a toolkit right now to help rural America do some outreach. We've created postcards. So the Census Bureau can't send to PO boxes, but we can. So we've been trying to figure out a formula to implement a policy where we can put a postcard in every PO box in a rural county that says, hey, don't forget to fill out your census because we can do that. So we're trying to help mitigate some of that. And the underlying everything is that the world has turned upside down. Up is down, left is right. Everything is kind of a little bit crazy because of the pandemic. And so normal operations are not normal, and we recognize that. So at the bottom of the slide, I popped in a link so you can go take a look at this map. It is interactive. You can drill down by zip code. You can go into census tract, which is just, it's the neighborhood. So like my census tract is like 3 blocks. I live in downtown Denver. So there are like 3 blocks in my area, and I color code it. So I can see that only 40% of my neighbors and I have filled out our census forms. So it helps you pinpoint where you might need to do a little bit of outreach and a little bit of effort. All right. Some of these slides are more information than y'all need, but I put them in so you could read them if you wanted to afterwards. The census is hiring 520,000 people is the last estimate. It's the largest ground game that's non-military in the country that the U.S. government ever does. They are still hiring. They can't do some of the hiring process because it requires fingerprinting, which is an in-person activity that they're not currently doing. But you can still apply, and they will be needing people in the fall. Some of these numbers are a little bit obsolete because of COVID-19, but we were facing a problem before the pandemic because people are mistrustful of government, people move a lot, technology is changing. We didn't know how online responses was going to go. Thank goodness they did that this year because that's how we've gotten the responses we have. Information explosion. Right now, it's all COVID, but in normal times, you have your phone that's buzzing and beeping with Snapchats and tweets and text messages and emails and Facebooks and all these things. Cutting through that clutter is hard. Mail is now very, very important, and people do check their mail. Maybe a little bit more than they did before because they're looking for packages because that's how people are getting supplies. But often junk mail fills your box, and so people just throw things away. All of these things, informal complex living arrangements is still a problem because we have people like that grandmother I talked about who is taking care of her granddaughter who doesn't want to usurp parental power and claim that child on her census form, and yet if the parents don't count that kid, the child doesn't get counted. And in 2010, we missed 2 million children in America, which is why our schools are chronically underfunded. If we don't have the population, then the education funding doesn't come to our states. So I can drive that point home. So it's better for that grandmother to count that child that she's caretaking who lives with her, even if the parents fill out their census form and put the kid on their census form as well. It is better to double count someone than to not count anyone at all. The Census Bureau can dedupe records. They cannot make up information that they don't have. So those informal complex living arrangements, roommate situations, the demographics of America and how we live have changed in the past several decades. That's a problem for us because people think, I have a friend who said, if I had talked to you, I wouldn't have realized I needed to count the guy who lives in my basement. And it's like, well, he lives in your house. And so there are 3 people who live in this house. Even it's you and your daughter and your tenants. And she's like, oh yeah, but I wouldn't have thought about it if I hadn't talked to you about it. So making those connections, it's important. All right, I know we're getting short on time, and I want to make sure we have question time. Typically, these are the folks that are the hardest to count, the hardest to get to respond. It's a who's who of community action. Low income, young children, single parents, people of color. These are the folks that we handle forms for every day. These are the people we give benefits to every day and try to make their lives a little bit better. The veritable who's who of community action. These are also the people that are the hardest to get to return that form. Hard to count people can be all kinds of things: hard to locate, hard to persuade, hard to contact, or hard to interview, or any of those 4. Could be more than one. We are asking people to help us hire, and actually, since we now have 120 extra days, we know that some of the workforce they've already hired will atrophy. Either senior citizens, this is a great job for somebody who's semi-retired to get to knock doors, won't feel comfortable with the pandemic going out and exposing themselves. And so we're going to lose some of the people they've already hired. So we do encourage you to ask your customers if they want to do part-time census enumeration. Some of the jobs are turning into non-in-person jobs, which will help. So phone work or computer work or something like that. But for the most part, they're high-paying jobs for the area. They're flexible work time, and it gives back to your community. we want people who live in the community to be the ones asking their neighbors to fill out the census form. If I showed up in neighborhoods in Harlem, I'm not going to get a good response because I don't look or sound or act like the people who live there. So we're trying to match culture and look and sound to get a better response. So, and it's more trustworthy if somebody who looks and sounds like you comes up and says, hey, give us this demographic information. These are both links to the pay rates and the job applications. So that's what's on this slide. We've talked about this a little bit, so I'm going to skip some of it, but community action touches these people every day in one way, shape, or form. And I know some of you might be sitting at home, unable to interact so much with your customers. And when that changes, we want to make sure that you know the facts and the basics so you can help your customers be counted. We are trusted messengers. They come to us when they have nothing and they need help, and we help them. And so if our voices are saying, hey, don't forget about the census, it's important for your community, it's one of the best ways that we can get people to respond. Just a little bit about the dollars, just to drive it home a little bit more. TANF, Head Start, LIHEAP, WIOA, Rural Rental Assistance Programs, CSBG dollars are all based, they're formulas. We could talk about formulas for a long time. But the bottom line is that the census numbers are one of the factors that goes into how New York's funding from the federal government for these programs is determined. So the more people we count in our communities, the more we'll get that we're due to do the programs that are listed on this page. Okay, what are we doing? Census Bureau is around the country. They've gone dark right now in the field because of the restrictions. But the Census Bureau is out there and they are pushing. You guys have a regional office located in New York, in the city. They have people called partnership specialists around the state. And the way to contact them, one way it would be to reach out to the New York regional office and ask them to put you in touch with the partnership specialist. But the Census Bureau is out and about, and they will be, and they are pushing efforts. Right now, all of what they're doing are sending the mail pieces. They're doing ads. They're doing Facebook ads. They're creating videos. They're creating content to push digitally. But they are preparing to be back out there in person. Complete count committees. I'm hoping that every county in New York has one of these. It's not unlike a tripartite board where you bring together parts of the community to talk about how you're going to count your population. So it might be that the mayor and the local businesses and the local nonprofits have all joined us to form a complete count committee. The partnership specialist from the Census Bureau often attends, and they talk about how to mobilize together and how they can not duplicate efforts, and how they can have a concerted plan to make sure that everyone is counted in their community. It could be that somebody takes on outreach to schools, somebody takes on outreach to the medical professionals to ask them to include a census message with their visits. Whatever it is will work best for your community. So not unlike community action, the complete count committees tailor of an approach specifically for your community. This website is linked in this, and it shows you where those committees are and gives you contact information. We are part of something called Census Counts 2020 that we, as in the National Community Action Partnership, there are 27 or 30 different entities that have come together to do the same thing as a complete count committee, but nationwide. So we lean on each other for support. A lot of the in-language translations that I get come from them. We have materials, we have in-language Spanish presentations. Lots of resources are available to us through this coalition. We work on people who live in poverty, but we have Color of Change, the Urban League, NAACP, all working to count the African American population. We have the Arab American Institute Foundation, the Asian Americans Advancing Social Justice. All of these groups are coming together to push their populations, which overlap with ours, as a concerted effort. The coalition is really cool because they give me resources. So if you need a random language that you can't find anywhere else, you need a pamphlet, and I was asked for Chin and Karen the other day. I managed to find them because of the Asian Americans Advancing Justice. They had those translations for me. So they're a great resource for us. Talked a little bit about partnership specialists. The Census Counts Coalition has people operating in state across the country, and this actually will take you to a list of those if you're so inclined. My job is to increase awareness and educate our frontline staff members, our EDs, our board members on the importance of the census to help us count the populations that we serve. My goal is to make this easy for everyone. So a little bit of training, some pamphlets, some handouts, some videos, trying to make this seamless for you and to give you ideas and ways that you can just mention it to your customers. That's my job. We do have a 10-member working group. I'm very pleased that Jackie Orr from the New York Association is on my steering committee. She's awesome. If you guys don't know, she's really great. But she also helps because she's convened a committee for the whole state on census activities. She helped us put together this presentation today. We have a website. It is communityactionpartnership.com/census-2020. There you will find everything census. One of the top things that we have right now is the COVID-19 impact on the census. That also happens to be where we keep people up to date on how the numbers are changing, so what the response rates are every day. So when the Census Bureau comes out with a change that's COVID related, we post it there. There's also a train the trainer there. All of our postcards and resources are there, all things census. We also have a complete count committee specifically for community action. I love this idea. It's a great model. Today we're actually having a complete count committee meeting for the community action complete count committee members, where we'll talk about the operational changes that the Census Bureau has come through. We'll talk about the new ideas we have for reaching out to folks. The goal is to have one person in every agency on that complete count committee. So if you would like to join us, it doesn't have to be just one. You're welcome to. Lauren can pop into the chat how you can sign up for that. Moodle. So if you are sitting at home right now and you are looking for training opportunities, Moodle is the thing for you. Not just census. So our LCRC team uses this quite a bit. Online self-paced learning tracks. You can pick a variety of courses that we have. We currently have one ready. We're creating 2 more. The first one is just the census basics. So what I've gone through today, for the most part, in depth, a little bit more in depth. We're putting on a train the trainer, so you can learn how to do these presentations yourself. If you are at home and not actually doing emergency services right now, one of the things you can do with your time is plan how, when things return to normal, which we'll never have, but when it comes back to more normal things, how you can train your fellow staff members, how you can implement a plan to count your community action customers. And doing our train the trainer, which is currently posted on our website, but will also be in Moodle, is a great way to do that. We also have materials available. So the next slide, I think, is a snapshot of that. But what we found really effective is, and I have a budget for it, is to send you free of charge pamphlets, flyers, palm cards, postcards, posters. So we have a full suite of things that are available. If you have a Head Start program, we have coloring pages that on the back have frequently asked questions and pointers, information for parents and guardians. The idea is that the kid colors it, hands it to the parents, and takes it home, ideally, was the original concept. And then there's information on why it's important to count your children. We're creating stickers. So the Head Start teachers can put a sticker on the back of the kid as they push them out the door to the bus or to be picked up by their parents that says, "Don't forget to count me." We have one-pagers in English. We have one-pagers in Spanish. We have Census Basics with the hotline and the URL on the back, hotlines in multiple languages to make it easy. So we can send those to your agency free of charge. I can't send you 1 million, but I can send you 1,000 if that's what your area needs. So Lauren, you can tell them how to order that in the chat. My goal, our goal, is to make this easy for you to do as you're doing other work. It doesn't have to be a separate track. In fact, it's better if it's not. It's, hey, let's fill out your TANF form. Okay, great. Let's talk about what we do next. And then at the end say, hey, I've got one more form for you. Can we fill out the census form, or have you filled out your census form? Can I help you walk through that? It'll take less than 10 minutes per person. When we have open agencies, if you can set up the terminal, a tablet or a computer or a phone line in the front lobby, you could do a raffle. Everyone who fills out the census in your lobby gets entered into for a free pizza or something. You can do that. But my point is that the goal is that as you're doing your other work, bringing up the census and just having that nudge could be enough to get them there. These are 2 of our postcards. The one on the left, we created for weatherization staff. Clearly, they're not doing that right now. But if you're doing food service and you're doing Meals on Wheels, or you're doing food pantry pickups, you can shove one of these or one of our one-pager flyers into every bag and put it on everything that you send out to the community. The America at Risk on the right, that's for, it's a more rural focused. Actually, no, that one's not. Oh, no, it is rural focused. Yes, okay, we've got questions. Okay, so I know we're running late on time, so I'm gonna speed through some of these things. Messaging is how this helps your community overall. That being said, we've got training videos. You can push these on social media. You can share them. The top left corner is 7 minutes, but the rest of them are all under 2 minutes. And they talk about different aspects of the census. It's easy, how do you do it, who do you count? Right now, again, if you're doing food pantries or Meals on Wheels, include a flyer. Ask me to send you some, I will. Any kind of emergency services where you are still in contact face-to-face with customers, include a flyer, include a mention. Think about how you're going to say it tactfully, because we know that it seems a little bit insensitive to say, hey, government form you need to fill out when you're trying to feed your kids. But it's almost a good tie-in to say, we have these services available right now because somebody filled out the census 10 years ago. So think about how that works well for you and figure out what your message will be before you say it, but make those comments. If you're doing a VITA program and people are dropping off their W-2s and their forms and then picking them back up, you can include a census form with that packet pickup. Or if you can get the accounting people to say something about the census when they're on the phone doing consultations, that's amazing. Any customer contact, slip in the census some way. If you are not in the field right now, you can do training to prepare for when you are. Any case management contact that you're doing, if you're on the phones, if you're sending emails, you can mention the census. My signature file says very simply, actually, I don't remember the exact verbiage. Lauren, can you pop it into the chat? It says something about have you filled out your census form? Here's the link. Okay, good. I answered the question. I don't get questions on the screen easily when I'm managing the PowerPoint. Social media, we have memes galore. We have graphics. We have sample tweets. We have Instagram posts. So one of our toolkits, we're developing the rural toolkit. We have a VITA toolkit. We have an overall toolkit that we add to all the time. And all of our partners have toolkits too. So if you deal with a specific segment of the population, if you handle African Americans mostly, Color of Change, Urban League, NAACP, they all have toolkits with specific messaging for that population. And they have the same graphics and sample tweets and all that kind of stuff. So you can use those resources and push online with your spheres of influence. If you're doing intake contact, simple to do, ask, hey, have you filled out your census form? It's just a simple question, and just make sure that you can troubleshoot some of the answers. One of the forms we have available, I can send them to you. You can also access all of these things online. They're all downloadable. It's a frequently asked questions section. So, all right. This is the messaging research. I'm not going to go through it, but it's very interesting. It talks about why kids are undercounted, how parents count themselves but don't count their children. We need to make sure that people count their newborns and their children. 2 million children were missed in 2010. It's a lot of money. Goes through top messaging. It goes through messaging on African Americans. Under 35-year-old males are the populations that we need to focus on. African American communities, because of the disproportionate number of African American males who are incarcerated, it's even more important that we count African American women and African American children to make up that shortfall. Because if you're incarcerated, you are counted where you're jailed. So if the jail is in upstate New York, that's where the money goes, rather than Harlem or wherever you live in New York City. So there's disparity there. So we have to push to make sure that we try to fix that inequality. We also have Hispanic messaging. Hispanic populations tend to prefer the paper form. We have to make sure that they know that the citizenship question is not on there. We have Asian American reasons, top messaging, Native American reasons, and top messaging. So these are all questions, simple FAQ questions. I want to touch on this one and then we'll do questions. I know some of you might need to leave, but you can leave your questions in the box. We will send out all of this afterwards and I will answer your questions on the recording. Is it safe? So in addition to there not being a citizenship question, the Census Bureau has rules and regulations that protect confidentiality. Census data can only be used for statistical purposes. All they do is take information in. They are the data crunching department of our government. They do collect information from other bureaus. They get information from Health and Human Services and HUD, IRS, Homeland Security, but the information flows one way. That only comes in. They do not send it out. They do not identify individuals at all and their responses at all, except in aggregate, except all in one, like in one group. That's how they figure out that, say, the average age of a woman's first baby in America was 22 back in 1940, but in 2020, it's 27. Because it's aggregated data. It's not Jane in 1950 had a baby at 22 and Sally had a baby at 27 in 2020. They don't do that. After 72 years, those forms are disclosed. The next section will be released in 2022. But to put this in context, I'm going to look at the form that my grandfather filled out and my grandmother in 1950, when my mother was 2 years old and my aunt was 1 and my uncle wasn't even born yet. So my grandfather passed away 20-something years ago, 22 years ago. So he doesn't care anymore if that data is out there necessarily, but it's really cool for the family to see that. The genealogy researchers are really excited about this. But my point is that if you've got a family who's concerned that they put down 8 people in a house that's only supposed to house 6 people with their Section 8 housing voucher, the landlord will not know, and it will not impact them at all. They will not lose their house because that information 72 years from now won't matter. Census Bureau employees who have access to the information have been sworn secrecy. It's something called Title 13, and they pledge an oath to not reveal individual private data. So they won't tell what your responses are at all associated with your name at all. If they do, they can be fined up to $250,000 and they can be jailed for up to 5 years. You can also help people fill out their census form. You're adults and you can, however you're helping people fill out their TANF forms or their Head Start applications, you can do that right now. You cannot go online if you know that so-and-so will never fill out their form and fill it out for them, but you wouldn't fill out a form for them like that anyway. So this is common sense, but you can help people in any way that you can right now, talking it through over the phone, guiding them to the website, use your own best judgment, but you can help people fill their forms out. You simply cannot just do it on your own for them. Accessibility issues we've got. Okay, I'm gonna keep this up because this is my email address. I saw a couple of questions go through. Lauren, can you read them to me because I can't find the screen?
Yeah, sure. So the first question is for people who have a PO box but are not able to get to a computer. How do they fill out the census?
The phones, new option this year. So they can dial, I mean, it's 844-330-2020 is the English line, but they can call up the phones, even if they don't have a census ID, and they can fill out the form over the phones. They have operators. There's some languages have had a 20 or 30 or 40-minute wait. I haven't heard about that happening lately, so I think they fixed those problems. But the Census Bureau had to put all those operators remote. So there was a lag, but that's been fixed. So Lauren, if you can find the languages that the phone lines are in and pop them into the chat, that would be great.
Second question, if someone has already been fingerprinted for their current job, why couldn't the federal government use those people to help with the hiring?
Yeah, because it's the government. They can't. They have to do it themselves. Yeah, I understand that that's frustrating. It happens a lot. I'm frustrated that something like the point in time survey that counts the homeless population most effectively overall, we can't use that data because it's not, it's kind of like voting. If you actually don't go to the polls and fill out your ballot at the polls, it doesn't count. It's the same thing, but it's just government bureaucracy. They have to be in control of the process. So, all right. I do actually see questions now. I fixed it. Oh, is that it? Those are all the questions we have?
One more question. What happens if someone fills it out twice?
The Census Bureau can dedupe, and so it's not a problem. Again, it's better to have somebody fill it out twice than not at all. And I know that, so I know my grandmother's going to call, and I'm kind of worried that she's going to enjoy that human interaction so much that she asks to call again. So they know that that might happen. Same thing, I'm not worried about double counting anybody who's a marginalized population. I'm not worried about counting the same homeless man twice because we will undercount the homeless population. But that being said, let's say a college kid is counted at the dorms and home in Albany, where he lives with his parents because he was there on April 1st. The Census Bureau will catch that, will realize that it's a dormitory address, and will take the student out of the Albany population. So that's one of the reasons why they need time at the end of once everything is counted, once everybody has responded, they need time to clean the data. So dedupe is always better, and that's one of the reasons why you provide your phone number when you fill out the form, so you can be called for clarifications. When people door knock, some door knockers will be doing quality assurance. I think they're trying to do that via phone this year because of the pandemic, but they do quality assurance checks, and they do some follow-ups for clarifying. So if you put under race that you're a purple unicorn, you're going to get a phone call or you're going to get a door knock. And someone will say, are you really a purple unicorn, or maybe you're not? I hope that clarified that question. More questions?
Why?
Okay.
Oh, I got one more. Why would
great.
college students be counted at their school instead of home if they will return to live at home after college, most likely?
Yeah, so so two things. This is a snapshot of America. So if you have 2,500 college kids, I actually don't know the population of NYU, and I know there are other colleges in New York City and in New York, SUNY Binghamton, sure. If you've got 2,000 kids and the school always has 2,000 students, then if you don't count those kids on college campus, even if they will go back to wherever their home is when they graduate, SUNY Binghamton will be underfunded if you don't count those 2,000 kids there, because you'll graduate 500 kids, right? You'll graduate 500 kids, and you'll get 500 freshmen in the fall. So the rolling population of Binghamton for SUNY is 2,000. For the next 10 years, that's about what it is. And maybe they increase enrollment in 2030, it's 2,500, then we'll adjust. But the reason we count those kids where they go to school is because those populations will return to school. When the pandemic is over, when things return to, quote, normal, we'll still have that population there. And we need to make sure that Binghamton gets the resources that they deserve and that they need. One of the fears is that these college towns will be decimated because they're not going to have the funding that they're used to having because those populations are missed. how that makes sense. A good example is my partner went to a small school in Galesburg, Illinois called Knox College. And the only thing there is the college, really. I mean, there's some townies, but that school funds the economy of the entire city because those kids come in, they eat, they drink, they play, they buy gas, they go, they go to the pool hall, whatever it is. And so if we don't count those kids because they were all back home because of the natural disaster, this is not normal, then Galesburg won't get the funding that they need for the roads and for the schools, and the town might die. So rural America, we're really worried about because rural America is already hard to count. And because they haven't been invited yet, their response rates are lower. We're worried those towns will die in the same way that I'm worried about New York City not giving enough funding because the school's emptied out. If those kids aren't counted, then New York City won't get the federal resources that they deserve. Another way to look at this is Utah. I was talking to somebody from Utah who said, well, we need to count all of our missionaries wherever they are in the world because they will come back and live in Utah. Yes, they will, but then another generation of missionaries will go out. And so there's always an age gap. There's always a gap in Utah of kids between the ages of 18 and 22 because that population goes on missionaries. So that's kind of how you have to think about it. It's a rolling population, and even if that one person will go back to wherever they grew up, somebody will take their place in that dorm room or if that off-campus housing because they'll be there for school. I hope that made sense. I've been talking for an hour, so. More questions? I'll stay as long as there are questions. And if not, you can always email me follow-up questions. I'm more than happy to respond.
I don't see any more.
Okay. Okay, well, this is the way. So please, if you have additional questions, shoot me an email, shoot Lauren an email. You can email Lil too if you know her. She works just a little bit on our project, but she knows a lot of the answers and can help you as well. Or if you know Jim Masters and Alan Stansberry, you can reach out to them. If you have ideas or thoughts or want to bounce something off of us, we came up with the rural postcard idea to stuff PO boxes because an agency thought of it and came to us. So we look to you to see what creative ideas you can come up with to talk to our populations about this. And we're here to support you. Or to say, yes, that's a great idea. Let's tweak it this way and make it even better. Or that might not work because of this. Like, we're here for all of that. So please do reach out, and I hope you're all staying safe. And thank you for the work you do. One of the things that we have all been amazed by at the National Partnership staff is how incredible our network is. You guys have risen to the challenge of COVID in ways that are awe-inspiring. So I thank you all for the work you're doing. And I hope that you will reach out and join us this afternoon for our Complete Count Committee meeting, or just in general for the Complete Count Committee members. You're welcome. And ask me any other questions that you have.